I'm treading delicate waters. I'm gonna review What is a Woman. Keep in mind, whenever I review a political film, I tend to just focus on my experience watching the movie. I'm kind of politically in the middle, I would say. So there's not really one side I side with, so it makes it easier for me to just judge the filmmaking because I'm too stupid to have my own opinions about things. So, for those of you who don't know the movie What is a Woman, this is the latest documentary from the Daily Wire, which is a more right-wing political website streaming service. They actually just started their streaming service relatively not long ago, but they have mostly made narrative films and not ones with a political slant to them. So I would say this is their first movie, from what I'm aware of, their first movie that has a political message to it. My thoughts on the Daily Wire? I don't really like the Daily Wire. I find most of the hosts on the Daily Wire to be quite condescending and a little smug. All of them except Ben Shapiro. Ben Shapiro doesn't fall into that category. Ben Shapiro is just on the spectrum. And not the gender spectrum. I'm talking about the other spectrum. But anyway, I'm not particularly fond of Matt Walsh. I'm not particularly fond of Candace Owens. I think the worst is Michael Knowles. Because this guy, every time I see a picture of him, they give me an ad. This guy is holding like a big cigar and holding a glass of scotch. And I'm like, I know this guy, once he goes home, he drinks White Claw. I don't know, I just get a vibe from him. I just get a vibe that he's a White Claw drinker. What can I say? But anyway, that's one of the things I enjoyed about this documentary, surprisingly enough, is I liked Matt Walsh in it, which I wasn't expecting because I did have some pre-formulated thoughts on him as a political commentator. He might have a bit of a smug personality when he's behind a desk, spouting out his political beliefs, but in this documentary, he kind of scales it back a notch. And he has a very deadpan delivery. He channels a lot of Morgan Spurlock in his attempt to find out what is a woman. And he's kind of just socially awkward in this, which isn't a personality trait that from what I saw of him, that I figured out. That editing also brings out that social awkwardness to his performance. The editing will leave out moments where he's like kind of tripping on his words, doesn't know what to say. There's a part where he throws a javelin and he completely fucks up. So, yeah, I thought Matt Walsh was actually the best part of this movie, surprisingly enough, because I didn't like him really much going into this movie. While I'm sticking with the positives, I thought the beginning of the movie was actually quite strong. I was expecting it to be a very biased movie that is a hit piece on transgenderism, but I would say the first half doesn't really fall into that category. It's really this weird, socially awkward, lanky dude going about life, trying to figure out what is a woman. He goes to different people, transgender people, different scientists, different biologists, university professors, and just random people, and tries to figure out what is a woman. There are some very thought-provoking moments, especially when he goes to a transgender person who's unable to answer the question, what is a woman? That is pretty striking because you would think that someone who went through with this surgery that's very expensive and irreversible would have a clear definition of what a woman is. Also, some very funny moments. I wasn't actually expecting to laugh in this movie, but I actually did laugh. I remember laughing hard twice. There was one time where he's interviewing a man who owns a Star Wars shop, and apparently the guy refused to use pronouns or something like that. And the old fart just says, I don't give a shit about your feelings, I'm old. Guys, I want to be old to the point where I don't give a shit. I can't wait for retirement age just so I can stop giving a fuck, you know? There's some very funny moments in the first half of this movie, and I honestly really liked the idea of exploring what is a woman. The definition of a woman is so different nowadays. Can we put our finger on what a woman is? I wish it kind of stayed like that throughout the whole movie, but unfortunately, I would say the second half kind of becomes more of a hit piece. I felt like this movie was struggling between two different movies. I felt like on the one hand, you had the movie where it's just about a man trying to define what is a woman. He's a family man, he has a wife, he has daughters. What is a woman? he can't figure it out. I thought that was pretty interesting, but then it becomes a second movie, which is, how do you treat gender dysphoria? What's the proper way about treating gender dysphoria? So it was kind of struggling between what is a woman and how do you treat gender dysphoria. And I thought that's what kind of took me off guard, was that constant shifting. It happens at some point in the first half. They have this whole section of the movie that's dedicated to female athletes that have to compete with transgender athletes and what their experience is. And I remember just thinking, okay, that kind of doesn't really fit with the movie What is a Woman? And then you revert back, this guy goes to Africa, tries to figure out what a woman is, and I was like, okay, I'm a bit more on board now. Then second half, it just becomes transgender hit piece, like I was expecting prior to turning this movie on. The hit piece kind of portion of the movie focuses on Big Pharma's role in transgenderism, the irreversibility of gender reassignment surgery, and people buying into the transgender movement as a cultural phenomenon rather than it being a simple case of gender dysphoria. And I think all of those are important discussions to have. I just wish that it wasn't in this movie, because the portion of the movie that was trying to answer what is a woman was a lot more interesting. And there's so much more you could have done with the idea of what is a woman. They could have went to evolutionary biologists and try to answer what is a woman. They could have looked at other primates and answer what is a woman. Well, a woman is defined as this in the animal kingdom, and we kind of have those tendencies as humans. You could have looked at it from a more biology standpoint. You could have looked at it from a chemistry standpoint, what hormones are at play. I wish it just focused on what is a woman, because that's what the title of the movie is. That's what this man's journey is. That first half was also a lot more of like a provocateur reality film, kind of along the same lines of a Borat, although not as good as Borat. But that second half kind of just becomes talking heads spewing their political beliefs to you, and you're just like, okay, I get it. One thing that actually did surprise me going into this movie is that Matt Walsh does not try to discredit gender dysphoria. He doesn't try to say that it's not real. He does kind of undermine it by saying that there are some cases where it's a cultural thing rather than actual gender dysphoria, which I can get behind, but that's actually one thing that surprised me going into this movie. I thought he was just going to discredit it altogether. And like I said, the first half of this movie is more reality provocateur filmmaking, and the editing does feel very biased in it, which is a thing that annoyed me in the first half of the movie. Every movie like Borat, Bruno, all those movies, they're gonna have some editing to bring out the funny moments, and it is biased because you want those funny moments to shine. So it's gonna be biased regardless. I felt like this one went too heavy. There's a point where he goes to a university professor and asks the university professor for his thoughts on things. They kind of just do like this time-lapse thing where it's kind of like Matt Walsh is yawning, like, oh, this is boring. But I was actually curious as to what he had to say, just because I want to hear both sides of the story, you know? I don't see myself ever seeing this movie again. It kind of is a movie made for someone who has the Daily Wire streaming service. If you find yourself with the Daily Wire streaming service, you're gonna like this movie. It's a Borat kind of movie, but with a right slant to it, which, judging from the last Borat movie, I didn't really like that movie because it had a very left slant to it. This movie I don't really like because it has a very right slant to it. The beginning of the movie had like a good flow to it. It was about a guy trying to answer what a woman is. Now, I feel like there's so much more you could have explored with that, but instead it kind of becomes a transgender hit piece, which I have my own beliefs on the transgender movement. I'm not going to say if they coincide with this movie or not, but regardless, I feel like that first half was a lot more interesting. Guys, have you seen What is a Woman? You don't have to comment below if you're a little shy, but if you feel like you want to give your thoughts on the movie, comment below and let me know what you think of it, and I'll see you guys around. I'll put my rating, actually. Here's my rating. I don't want to put my rating at the beginning because people are going to get mad. Anyway, I'll see you guys around.